Aaron, go ahead.
Good morning. My name is Aaron Brown. I'm calling in from North Portland, where I'm blessed to be a constituent of both Speaker Kotek and Senator Frederick. Testifying today on my concerns about this bill. My organization will submit testimony before tomorrow's deadline. Our letter is going to echo many of the concerns that you've already heard expressed in written testimony submitted last night by private citizen Doug Allen, as well as organizations including Verde and the Safe Routes Partnership. I'm going to try and use my time today to explain why it's essential that the legislature push ODOT to get our transportation policy right for a litany of reasons. This agency needs your tenacious and brave leadership. I've heard so much on this morning's call where elected leaders have been championing some laudable goals. I'm genuinely sympathetic to the desires to reduce congestion. The phrase traffic sucks might be among the very small number of things that both Democrats and Republicans can agree upon these days. I've heard language from Representative Prusak about addressing seismic concerns. I've heard language from Speaker Kotek about carbon emissions. I've heard a lot about the need for economic stimulus in the wake of the COVID recession and getting Oregonians back to work. But before you sign off on a blank check for ODOT to double down on this litany of freeway expansions around the Portland region, how certain are you that ODOT's mega projects will be accountable to these goals? ODOT is great at using flowery language, sleights of hand to hide the impacts these freeways have to their communities, to claim that they are investing in these communities despite overwhelming opposition from the communities. I want to make unequivocally clear that No More Freeways fundamentally believes that congestion pricing and not tolling is great policy that needs to be implemented before freeway expansion. We can either put prices on driving on high-demand roads to maximize the amount of money that the state makes, or to minimize the amount of congestion that Oregonians and freight faces while maneuvering on our freeway. We simply cannot do both, and I think all of the legislators on this committee on both sides of the aisle should have reasons for skepticism that ODOT sees tolling as a potential slush fund for a bunch of outdated, questionable mega projects when there's so much need on existing roads, as Metro Council President Lynn Peterson articulated earlier this morning. 40% of Oregon's carbon emissions come from transportation. An article in the Sunday edition of the New York Times just this week reported that a recent study suggested keeping vehicle miles traveled flat for the next 30 years would cut carbon emissions just as significantly as electrifying 205 million electric vehicles. ODOT talks a big game about these projects lowering. Politely, that's bunk. If ODOT was serious about carbon emissions, we would be dramatically investing more in transit, biking, and walking, not just writing a big check for these freeway expansions. It's also worth noting that directing congestion pricing revenue towards building more freeways is like instituting a carbon tax, but using the revenue to build a new coal plant. It's antithetical to the entire point, and if you're serious about reducing congestion instead of maximizing revenue, why aren't we using the revenue raised to invest in transportation alternatives? There's no equitable way to widen a freeway. Providing Oregonians poor enough to not own a car with better transit service is a much better use of that revenue. I also want to flag a report by Transportation for America released last year showed that directing transportation funding towards transit and walkable communities created 70% more jobs than investment in highways. 70% is a big number. If you want to make sure that any economic recovery bill that builds back better is truly helping the largest number of Oregonians, please discourage ODOT from locking in billions of dollars on all these freeway projects and instead direct them for infrastructure projects that actually serve the needs of their communities and create 70% more jobs. I understand that my language is annoying and alarmist and radical, but I implore all of you to at least adopt a trust but verify approach with the Oregon Department of Transportation. And even if you doubt some of our accusations, you can start asking critical questions. Don't you instead wonder how many miles of high-speed rail, how many sidewalks near elementary schools, how many inner-city buses connecting rural communities to jobs and hospitals we could instead be funding? I heard Senator Byer talk about the importance of jurisdictional transfers and fixing orphan highways in his district. A major reason, Senator Byer, that your district has so many potholed orphan highways is that ODOT has directed all of their revenue over the last couple decades to expansions, not maintaining existing facilities. Do you know how many dangerous orphan highways there are all over the state we could be funding if we did not build more freeways? And let's be clear, these orphan freeways are extremely lethal. 40% of Washington County's traffic fatalities over the last decade have been on TV Highway. TV Highway, one road, has 40% of all of the fatalities. That's another orphan highway that ODOT owns, that ODOT has neglected in pursuit of these other freeway expansions. I'm going to close by saying investing billions of dollars in freeways in 2021 is the equivalent of investing billions of dollars in blockbuster video in 2005. Back in 2005, if somebody approached you about investing your life's fortune in the retail video chain, you might consider it. Unless you were some tech mogul that knew Netflix was coming, you probably didn't know that there was this new streaming system that would be coming. But if you had invested all of your money in blockbuster video in 2005, you would regret it now. And as someone that plans on having children and grandchildren maybe someday, and I'm worried about the climate crisis that kind of renders everything else mute and irrelevant if we don't meaningfully act soon, I'm begging you not to put my future on the line by investing in blockbuster video. I know that many of you signed on and supported House Bill 2017, and you're really proud of this legislation, and you are pledging to fulfill that promise of that bill signed 4 years ago. Well, I know many of you have also pledged a commitment to act on climate, and you're going to have to choose which of those commitments that you fundamentally care about. It's up to the committee of esteemed legislators in front of me to determine which promises Oregon's legislature intends to keep. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Brown. Next up, Nellie Deaver.